Book 1, Chapter 5 of The Wanderer's Necklace by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Battle on the Sea. On the morrow, Thorvald, my father, sent messengers to the headmen of Agger, telling them of all that he and his house had suffered at the hands of Steinar, whereof those of their folk who had been present at the feast could bear witness. He added that if they stood by Steinar in his wickedness and treachery, thenceforward he and the men of the north would be their foes and work them mischief by land and sea. In due course these messengers returned with the tale that the head men of Agger had met together and deposed Steinar from his lordship over them, electing another man, a nephew of Steinar's father. Also they sent a present of gold rings in atonement for the wrong which had been done to the house of Thorvald by one of their blood, and prayed that Thorvald and the northern men would bear them no ill will for that in which they were blameless. Cheered by this answer, which halved the number of their foes, my father, Thorvald of Aar, and those overmen of whom he was the high lord, began to make their preparations to attack Athalbrand on his island of Lesso. Of all these things Athalbrand learned by his spies, and later, when the warships were being prepared and manned, two messengers came from him, old men of repute, and demanded to see my father. This was the substance of his message, which was delivered in my hearing: that he, Athalbrand, was little to blame for what had happened, which was due to the mad passions of two young people who had blinded and misled him; that no marriage had taken place between Steinar and his daughter Iduna, as he was prepared and able to prove, since he had refused to allow any such marriage; that therefore he was ready to outlaw Steinar, who only dwelt with him as an unwelcome guest, and to return his daughter Iduna to me, Olaf, and with her a fine in gold rings as compensation for the wrong done, of which the amount was to be ascertained by judges, to be agreed upon. My father entertained the messengers, but would give them no answer till he had summoned a council of the underlords who stood with him in this business. At that council, where I was present, some said that the insult could only be washed out with blood. At length I was called upon to speak as the man most concerned. While all listened, I rose and said: "These are my words. After what has chanced, not for all the wealth in Denmark would I take Iduna the Fair to be my wife. Let her stay with Steinar, whom she has chosen. Still, I do not wish to cause the blood of innocent men to be spent because of my private wrong. Neither do I wish to wreak vengeance upon Steinar, who for many years was my brother, and who has been led away by a woman, as may chance to any one of us, and has chanced to many. Therefore I say that my father should accept Athalbrand's fine in satisfaction of the insult to our house, and let all this matter be forgotten. As for myself, I propose to leave my home, where I have been put to shame, and to seek my fortune in other lands." Now the most of those present thought this a wise saying and were ready to abide by it. Yet, unluckily enough, it was made of no account by what had slipped from my lips at its end. Although many held me strange and fey, all men loved me because I had a kind heart and gentleness, also because of the wrongs that I had suffered, and for something which they saw in me, which they believed would one day make of me a great skald and wise leader. When she heard me announce thus publicly that I was determined to leave, Thora, my mother, whispered in the ears of Thorvald, my father, and Ragnar and others also said to each other that this might not be. It was Ragnar, the headlong, who sprang up and spoke the first. "Is my brother to be driven from us and his home like a thrall caught in theft because a traitor and a false woman have put him to shame?" he said. "I say that ask Athalbrand's blood to wash away that stain, not his gold, and that if need be I will seek it alone and die upon his spears. Also I say that if Olaf my brother turns his back upon this vengeance, I name him Niddering." "No man shall name me that," I said, flushing, "at least of all Ragnar." So, amid shouts, for there had been long peace in the land, and all the fighting men sighed for battle, it was agreed that war should be declared on Athalbrand, those present pledging themselves and their dependents to follow it to the end. "Go back to the troth breaker, Athalbrand," said my father to the messengers. "Tell him that we will not accept his fine of gold, who come to take all his wealth, and with it his land and his life. Tell him also that the young Lord Olaf refuses his daughter Iduna, since it has not been the fashion of our house to wed with drabs. Tell Steinar, the woman thief, that he would do well to slay himself, or to be sure that he is killed in battle, since if we take him living he shall be cast into a pit of vipers, or sacrificed to Odin, the god of honour. Begone!" "We go," answered the spokesman of the messengers. "Yet before we go, Thorvald, we would say to you that you and your folk are mad. Some wrong has been done to your son, though perhaps not so much as you may think. For that wrong full atonement has been offered, and with it the hand of friendship on which you spit. Know then that the mighty Lord Athalbrand does not fear war, since for every man you can gather he numbers 2, all pledged to him until the death. Also he has consulted the oracle, and its answer is that if you fight with them, but one of your house will be left living." "Begone!" thundered my father, "lest presently you should stay here dead." So they went. That day my heart was very heavy, and I sought Freydisa to take counsel with her. "Trouble hovers over me like a croaking raven," I said. "I do not like this war for a woman who is worth nothing, although she has hurt me sorely. I fear the future that it may prove even worse than the past has been." "Then come to learn it, Olaf, for what is known need no more be feared." "I am not so sure of that," I said. "But how can the future be learned?" "Through the voice of the god, Olaf. Am I not one of Odin's virgins who know something of the mysteries? Yonder in his temple, mayhap he will speak through me if you dare to listen." "Aye, I dare. I should like to hear the god speak, true words or false." "Then come and hear them, Olaf." So I went up to the temple, and Freydisa, who had the right of entry, unlocked its door. We passed in and lit a lamp in front of the seated wooden image of Odin, that for unnumbered generations had rested there behind the altar. I stood by the altar, and Freydisa crouched herself before the image, her forehead laid upon its feet, and muttered runes. After a while she grew silent, and fear took hold of me. The place was large, and the feeble light of the lamp scarcely reached to the arched roof. All about me were great formless shadows. I felt that there were 2 worlds, one of the flesh and one of the spirit, and that I stood between the 2. Freydisa seemed to go to sleep. I could no longer hear her breathing. Then she sighed heavily and turned her head, and by the light of the lamp I noticed that her face was white and ghastly. "What do you seek?" her lips asked, for I saw them moving. Yet the voice that issued from them was not her own voice, but that of a deep-throated man who spoke with a strange accent. Next came the answer in the voice of Freydisa. "I, your virgin, seek to know the fate of him who stands by the altar, one whom I love." For a while there was quiet. Then the first voice spoke, still through the lips of Freydisa. Of this I was sure, for those of the statue remained immovable. It was that it had always been a thing of wood. "Olaf, the son of Thorvald," said the deep voice, "is an enemy of us, the gods, as was his forefather whose grave he robbed. As his forefather's fate was, so shall his be, for in both of them dwells the same spirit. He shall worship that which is upon the hilt of the sword he stole from the dead, and in this sign shall conquer, since it prevails against us and makes our curse of none effect. Great sorrow shall he taste, and great joy. He shall throw away a sceptre for a woman's kiss, and yet gain a greater sceptre. Olaf, whom we curse, shall be Olaf the Blessed. Yet in the end we shall prevail against his flesh and that of those who cling to him, preaching that which is upon the sword, but not with the sword, among whom thou shalt be numbered, woman, thou and another who has done him wrong." The voice died away and was followed by a silence so deep that at length I could bear it no more. "Ask of the war," I said, "and of what shall happen." "It is too late," answered the voice of Freydisa. "I sought to know of you, Olaf, and you alone, and now the spirit has left me." Then came another long silence, after which Freydisa sighed thrice and awoke. We went out of the temple, I bearing the lamp and she resting on my arm. Near the door I turned and looked back, and it seemed to me that the image of the god glared upon me wrathfully. "What has chanced?" asked Freydisa when we stood beneath the light of the friendly stars. "I know nothing. My mind is a blackness." I told her word for word. When I had finished, she said, "Give me the Wanderer's sword." I gave it to her, and she held it against the sky by the naked blade. "The hilt is a cross," she said. "But how can a man worship a cross and preach it and conquer thereby? I cannot interpret this rede. Yet I do not doubt but that it shall all come true, and that you, Olaf, and I are doomed to be joined in the same fate, whatever it may be, and with us some other who has wronged you, Steinar perchance, or Iduna herself. Well, of this at least I am glad, for if I have loved the Father, I think that I love the Son still more, though otherwise." And leaning forward, she kissed me solemnly on the brow. After Freydisa and I had sought the oracle of Odin, 3 long ships of war sailed by the light of the moon from Fladstrand for Athalbrand's Isle of Lesso. I do not know when we sailed, but in my mind I can still see those ships creeping out to sea. In command of the first was Thorvald, my father, of the second Ragnar, my brother, and of the third myself, Olaf, and on each of these ships were 50 men, all of them stout fighters. The parting with Thora, my mother, had been sad, for her heart foreboded ill of this war, and her face could not hide what her heart told her. Indeed, she wept bitterly, and cursed the name of Iduna the Fair, who had brought this trouble on her house. Freydisa was sad also, yet watching her opportunity, she glided up to me just before I embarked, and whispered to me, "Be of good cheer, for you will return, whoever is left behind." "It will give me little comfort to return if certain others are left behind," I answered. "Oh, that the folk had hearkened to me and made peace." "Too late to talk of that now," said Freydisa, and we parted. This was our plan: to sail for Lesso by the moonlight, and when the moon went down to creep silently toward the shores of the island. Then, just at the first break of dawn, we proposed to beach the ships on a sandy strand we knew, and rush to attack Athalbrand's hall, which we hoped to carry before men were well awake. It was a bold scheme, and one full of dangers, and yet we trusted that its very boldness would cause it to succeed, especially as we had put it about owing to the unreadiness of our ships. No attack would be made until the coming of the next moon. Doubtless all might have gone well with us but for a strange chance. As it happened, Athalbrand, a brave and skilful captain, who from his youth had seen much war by sea and land, had a design of his own which brought ours to nothing. It was that he and his people should sail to Fladstrand, burn the ships of Thorvald, my father, that he knew were fitting out upon the beach, which he hoped to find unguarded, or at most only watched by a few men, and then return to Lesso before he could be fallen upon. By ill luck he had chosen this very night for his enterprise. So it came about that just as the moon was sinking, our watchmen caught sight of 4 other ships, which by the shields that hung over their bulwarks they knew must be vessels of war, gliding towards them over the quiet sea. "Athalbrand comes to meet us," cried one, and in a minute every man was looking to his arms. There was no time for plans, since in that low light and mist the vessels were almost bow to bow before we saw each other. My father's ship ran in between 2 of Athalbrand's that were sailing abreast, while mine and that of Ragnar found themselves almost alongside of the others. On both sides the sails were let down, for none had any thought of flight. Some rushed to the oars and got enough of them out to work the ships. Others ran to the grappling irons, and the rest began to shoot with their bows. Before one could count 200 from the time of sighting, the war cry of Valhalla, Valhalla, victory or Valhalla, broke upon the silence of the night, and the battle had begun. It was a very fierce battle, and one that the gathering darkness made more grim. Each ship fought without heed to the others, for as the fray went on, they drifted apart, grappled to their foes. My father, Thorvald's vessel fared the worst, since it had an enemy on either bulwark. He boarded one and cleared it, losing many men. Then the crew of the other rushed on to him as he regained his own ship. The end of it was that my father and all his folk were killed, but only after they had slain the most of their foes, for they died fighting very bravely. Between Ragnar's ship and that of Athalbrand himself the fray was more even. Ragnar boarded Athalbrand and was driven back. Athalbrand boarded Ragnar and was driven back. Then for the second time Ragnar boarded Athalbrand with those men who were left to him. In the narrow waist of Athalbrand's ship a mighty battle was fought, and here at last Ragnar and Athalbrand found themselves face to face. They hacked at each other with their axes, till at length Ragnar, with a fearful blow, drove in Athalbrand's helmet and clove his skull in 2, so that he died. But even as he fell, a man, it may have been friend or foe, for the moon was sinking and the darkness grew dense, thrust a spear into Ragnar's back, and he was carried dying to his own vessel by those who remained to him. Then that fight ceased, for all Athalbrand's people were dead or wounded to the death. Meanwhile, on the right, I was fighting the ship that was commanded by Steinar, for it was fated that we 2 should be thrown together. Here also the struggle was desperate. Steinar and his company boarded at the prow, but I and my men, charging up both boards, drove them back again. In that charge it is true that I, Olaf, fighting madly, as was my wont when roused, killed 3 of the Lesso folk with the Wanderer's sword. Still I see them falling one by one, followed by 6 of my people. I sprang on to the raised prow of Steinar's ship. Just then the grapnels parted, and there we were left, defending ourselves as best we could. My mates got their oars and once more brought our boat alongside. Grapple they could not because the irons were lost. Therefore, in obedience to the order which I shouted to them from the high prow of the enemy's ship, they began to hurl their ballast stones into her, and thus stove out her bottom, so that in the end she filled and sank. Even while she was down, the fray went on. Nearly all my people were down. Indeed, but two remained to me when Steinar, not knowing who I was, rushed up, and having lost his sword, gripped me round the middle. We wrestled, but Steinar, who was the stronger, forced me back to the bulwarks and so overboard. Into the sea we went together, just as the ship sank, drawing us down after her. When we rose, Steinar was senseless, but still clinging to me as I caught a rope that was thrown to me with my right hand, to which the Wanderer's sword was hanging by a leather loop. The end of it was that I and the senseless Steinar were both drawn back to my own ship just as the darkness closed in. An hour later came the dawn, showing a sad sight. My father, Thorvald's ship and one of Athalbrand's lay helpless, for all, or nearly all, their crews were dead, while the other had drifted off and was now half a mile away. Ragnar's ship was still grappled to its foe. My own was perhaps in the best case, for here over 20 men were left unhurt, and another 10 whose wounds were light. The rest were dead or dying. I sat on a bench in the waist of the ship, and at my feet lay the man who had been dragged from the sea with me. I thought that this man was dead till the first red rays of dawn lit upon his face, whereon he sat up, and I saw that he was Steinar. "Thus we meet again, my brother," I said in a quiet voice. "Well, Steinar, look upon your work," and I pointed to the dead and dying and to the ships around, whence came the sound of groans. Steinar stared at me and asked in a thick voice, "Was it with you, Olaf, that I fell into the sea?" "Even so, Steinar. I knew it not in the darkness, Olaf. If I had known, never would I have lifted a sword against you." "What did that matter, Steinar, when you had already pierced my heart, though not with a sword?" At these words Steinar moaned aloud, and then said, "For the second time you have saved my life." "Aye, Steinar, but who knows whether I can do so for a third time? Yet take comfort, for if I may, I will, for thus shall I be best avenged." "A white vengeance," said Steinar. "Oh, this is not to be borne," and drawing a knife he wore at his girdle, he strove to kill himself. But I, who was watching, snatched it away, then gave an order. "Bind this man and keep him safe. Also bring him drink and a cloak to cover him." "Best kill the dog," grumbled the captain, to whom I spoke. "I kill the one who lays a finger on him," I replied. Someone whispered into the captain's ear, whereon he nodded and laughed savagely. "Ah!" he exclaimed, "I am a thick head. I had forgotten Odin and his sacrifice. Yes, yes, we'll keep the traitor safe." So they bound Steinar to one of the benches and gave him ale and covered him with a blood-stained cloak taken from a dead man. I also drank of the ale and drew a cloak about me, for the air was keen. Then I said, "Let us go to the other ships and see what has chanced there." They got out the oars and rowed to Ragnar's vessel, where we saw men stirring. "How went it with you?" I asked of one who stood upon the prow. "Not so ill, Olaf," he answered. "We won, and but now, with the new light, have finished the game. They are all quiet yonder," he added, nodding at the vessel of Athalbrand, to which they were still grappled. "Where is Ragnar?" I asked. "Come on board and see," answered the man. A plank was thrust out, and I ran across it, fear gripping my heart. Resting against the mast sat Ragnar, dying. "Good morrow to you, Olaf," he gasped. "I'm glad you live, that there may be one left to sit at our." "What do you mean, my brother?" "I mean, Olaf, that our father Thorvald is dead. They called it to us from yonder," and he pointed with his red sword to our father's ship that lay side by side with one of Athalbrand's. "Athalbrand is dead, for I slew him, and ere the sun is well clear of the sea, I also shall be dead. Oh, weep not, Olaf. We have won a great fight, and I travel to Valhalla with a glorious company of friends and foes there to await you. I say that had I lived to be old, never could I have found a better death, who then at last might have died like a cow. Get the ships to Flat Strand, Olaf, and gather more men to put all Lesso to the sword. Give us good burial, Olaf, and build a great mound over us that we may stand thereon at moonrise and mock the men of Lesso as they row past, till Valhalla is full and the world dies. Is Steinar dead? Tell me that Steinar is dead, for then I'll speak with him presently." "No, Ragnar, I have taken Steinar captive." "Captive? Why captive?" "Oh, I understand. That he may lie on Odin's altar. Friends, swear to me that Steinar shall lie on Odin's altar. Steinar the bride thief, Steinar the traitor. Swear it, for I do not trust this brother of mine, who has woman's milk in his breasts. By Thor, he might spare him if he had his way. Swear it, or I'll haunt your beds, O knights, and bring the other heroes with me. Swift now, while my ears are open." Then from both ships rose the cry of, "We swear! Fear not, Ragnar, we swear!" "That's well," said Ragnar. "Kiss me now, Olaf. Oh, what is it that I see in your eyes? A new light, a strange light. Olaf, you are not one of us. This time is not your time, nor this place your place. You travel to the end by another road. Well, who knows? At the end we may meet again. At least, I love you." Then he burst into a wild war song of blood and vengeance, and so singing, sank down and died. Afterwards, with much labour, I and the men who were left roped together our vessels, and to them those that we had captured, and when a favouring wind arose, sailed back for Fladstrand. Here a multitude awaited us, for a fishing boat had brought tidings of the great sea battle. Of the 150 men who had sailed in my father Thorvald's ship, 60 were dead and many other wounded, some of them to death. Athalbrand's people had fared even worse, since those of Thorvald had slain their wounded, only one of his vessels having escaped back to Lesso, there to tell the people of that island and Iduna all that had happened. Now it was a land of widows and orphans, so that no man need go wooing there for long. And of Ar and the country round the same song was sung. Indeed, for generations the folk of those parts must have told of the battle of Lesso, when the chiefs Thorvald and Athalbrand slew each other upon the seas at night because of a quarrel about a woman who was known as Iduna the Fair. On the sands of Fladstrand my mother, the Lady Thora, waited with the others, for she had moved thither before the sailing of the ships. When mine, the first of them, was beached, I leapt from it and, running to her, knelt down and kissed her hand. "I see you, my son Olaf," she said. "But where are your father and brother?" "Yonder, mother," I answered, pointing to the ships, and could say no more. Then why do they tarry, my son? Alas, mother, because they sleep, and will never wake again. Now Thora wailed aloud and fell down senseless. 3 days later she died, for her heart, which was weak, could not bear this woe. Only once did she speak before she died, and then it was to bless me and pray that we might meet again, and to curse Iduna. Folk noted that of Steinar she said nothing, either good or ill, although she knew that he lived and was a prisoner. Thus it came about that I, Olaf, was left alone in the world and inherited the lordship of Aur and its subject lands. No one remained save my dark-browed uncle Leif, the priest of Odin, Freydisa, the wise woman, my nurse, and Steinar, my captive foster brother, who had been the cause of all this war. The dying words of Ragnar had been noised abroad. The priest of Odin had laid them before the oracle of the gods, and this oracle declared that they must be fulfilled without change. So all the folk of that land met together at my bidding, yes, even the women and children. First we laid the dead in the largest of Athalbrand's ships, his people and Athalbrand himself being set undermost. Then on them we set the dead of Thorvald, my father, and his son Ragnar, my brother, bound to the mast upon their feet. This done, with great labour we dragged the ship on to high ground, and above it built a mighty mound of earth. For 20 days we toiled at the task, till at last it was finished, and the dead were hidden beneath it for ever. Then we separated to our homes and mourned a while. But Steinar was carried to the temple of Odin at Aur, and there kept in the prison of the temple. End of chapter 5. Book 1, Chapter 6 of The Wanderer's Necklace by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. How Olaf Fought with Odin. It was the eve of the spring feast of Odin. It comes back to me that at this feast it was the custom to sacrifice some beast to Odin and to lay flowers and other offerings upon the altars of certain other gods, that they might be pleased to grant a fruitful season. On this day, however, the sacrifice was to be of no beast, but of a man, Steinar the traitor. That night I, Olaf, by the help of Freydisa, the priestess of the god, won entrance to the dungeon where Steinar lay awaiting his doom. This was not easy to do. Indeed, I remember that it was only after I had sworn a great oath to Leif and the other priests that I would attempt no rescue of the victim, nor aid him to escape from his prison that I was admitted there, while armed men stood without to see that I did not break my word. For my love of Steinar was known, and in this matter none trusted me. That dungeon was a dreadful place. I see it now. In the floor of the temple was a trap door which, when lifted, revealed a flight of steps. At the foot of these steps was another massive door of oak, bolted and barred. It was opened and closed behind me, who found myself in a darksome den built of rough stone, to which air came only through an opening in the roof, so small that not even a child could pass it. In the far corner of this hole, bound to the wall by an iron chain fastened around his middle, lay Steinar upon a bed of rushes, while on a stool beside him stood food and water. When I entered bearing a lamp, Steinar sat up, blinking his eyes, for the light, feeble as it was, hurt them, and I saw that his face was white and drawn, and the hand he held to shade his eyes was wasted. I looked at him, and my heart swelled with pity, so that I could not speak. "Why have you come here, Olaf?" asked Steinar when he knew me. "Is it to take my life? If so, never were you more welcome." "No, Steinar. It is to bid you farewell, since tomorrow at the feast you die, and I am helpless to save you. In all things else men will obey me, but not in this." "And would you save me if you could?" "Aye, Steinar. Why not? Surely you must suffer enough with so much blood and evil on your hands." "Yes, I suffer enough, Olaf. So much that I shall be glad to die. But if you are not come to kill me, then it is that you may scourge me with your tongue." "Not so, Steinar. It is, as I have said, only to bid you farewell, and to ask you a question, if it pleases you to answer me. Why did you do this thing which has brought about such misery and loss, which has sent my father, my brother, and a host of brave men to the grave, and with them my mother, whose breasts nursed you?" "Is she dead also, Olaf? Oh, my cup is full." He hid his eyes in his thin hands and sobbed, then went on, "Why did I do it? Olaf, I did not do it, but some spirit that entered into me and made me mad, mad for the lips of Iduna the Fair. Olaf, I would speak no ill of her, since her sin is mine, but yet it is true that when I hung back she drew me on, nor could I find the strength to say her nay. Do you pray the gods, Olaf, that no woman may ever draw you on to such shame as mine. Hearken now to the great reward that I have won. I was never wed to Iduna, Olaf. Athalbrand would not suffer it till he was sure of the matter of the lordship of Agger. Then, when he knew that this was gone from me, he would suffer it still less, and Iduna herself seemed to grow cold. In truth, I believe he thought of killing me and sending my head as a present to your father Thorvald. But this Iduna forbade, whether because she loved me or for other reasons I cannot say. Olaf, you know the rest." "Aye, Steinar, I know the rest. Iduna is lost to me, and for that perhaps I should thank you, although such a thrust as this leaves the heart sore for life. My father, my mother, my brother, all are lost to me, and you, too, who were as my twin, are about to be lost. Night has you all, and with you 100 other men, because of the madness that was bred in you by the eyes of Iduna the Fair, who also is lost to both of us. Steinar, I do not blame you, for I know yours was a madness which, for their own ends, the gods send upon men, naming it love. I forgive you, Steinar, if I have aught to forgive, and I tell you so weary am I of this world, which I feel holds little that is good, that if I might, I'd yield up my life instead of yours and go to seek the others, though I doubt whether I should find them, since I think our roads are different. Hark, the priest calls me. Steinar, there's no need to bid you to be brave, for who of our northern race is not? That's our one heritage, the courage of a bull. Yet it seems to me that there are other sorts of courage which we lack, to tread the dark ways of death with eyes fixed on things gentler and better than we know. Pray to our gods, Steinar, since they are the best we have to pray to, though dark and bloody in their ways. Pray that we may meet again, where priests and swords are not, and women work no ruin, where we may love as we once loved in childhood, and there is no more sin. Fare you well, my brother Steinar, yet not for ever, for sure I am that here we did not begin, and here we shall not end. Oh, Steinar, Steinar, who could have dreamed that this would be the last? of all our happy fellowship. When I had spoken such words as these to him, I flung my arms about him, and we embraced each other. Then that picture fades. It was the hour of sacrifice. The victim lay bound upon the stone in the presence of the statue of the god, but outside of the doors of the little temple, that all who were gathered there might see the offering. The ceremonies were ended. Leif, the head priest, in his robe of office, had prayed and drunk the cup before the god, dedicating to him the blood that was about to fall, and narrating in a chant the crimes for which it was offered up, and all the tale of woe that these had brought about. Then, in the midst of an utter silence, he drew the sacrificial sword and held it to the lips of Odin, that the god might breathe upon it and make it holy. It would seem that the god did breathe. At least, that side of the sword which had been bright grew dull. Leif turned it to the people, crying in the ancient words, "Odin takes. Who dare deny?" All eyes were fixed upon him, standing in his black robe and holding aloft the gleaming sword that had grown dull. Yes, even the patient eyes of Steinar, bound upon the stone. Then it was that some spirit stirred in my heart, which drove me on to step between the priest and his prey. Standing in the doorway of the chapel, a tall, young shape against the gloom behind, I said in a steady voice, "I dare deny." A gasp of wonderment went up from all who heard, and Steinar, lifting himself a little from the stone, stared at me, shook his head as if in dissent, then let it fall again and listened. "Hearken, friends," I said. "This man, my foster brother, has committed a sin against me and my house. My house is dead. I alone remain, and on behalf of the dead and of myself I forgive him his sin, which indeed was less his than another's. Is there any man among you who at some time has not been led aside by woman, or who has not again and again desired to be so led aside? If such a one there be, let him say that he has no forgiveness in his heart for Steinar, the son of Hakon. Let him come forward and say it." None stirred. Even the women drooped their heads and were silent. "Then if this is so," I went on, "and you can forgive, as I do, how much more should a god forgive? What is a god? Is he not one greater than man, who must know all the weakness of man, which for his own ends he has bred into the flesh of man? How then can he do otherwise than be pitiful to what he has created? If this be so, how can the god refuse that which men are willing to grant? And what sacrifice can please him better than the foregoing of his own vengeance? Would a god wish to be outdone by a man? If I, Olaf, the man, can forgive, who have been wronged, how much more can Odin the god forgive, who has suffered no wrong save that of the breaking of those laws which will ever be broken by men who are as it has pleased him to fashion them? On Odin's behalf, therefore, and speaking as he would speak, could he have voice among us, I demand that you set this victim free, leaving it to his own heart to punish him." Now some whom my simple words had touched, I suppose because there was truth in them, although in those days and in that land none understood such truths, and others, because they had known and loved the open-handed Steinar, who would have given the cloak from his back to the meanest of them, cried, "Aye, let him go free. There has been enough of death through this Iduna." But more stood silent, lost in doubt at this new doctrine. Only Leif, my uncle, did not stand silent. His dark face began to work as though a devil possessed him, as indeed I think one did. His eyes rolled, he champed his jaws like an angry hog, and screamed. "Surely the Lord Olaf is mad, for no sane man would talk thus. Man may forgive while it is within his power, but this traitor has been dedicated to Odin. And can a god forgive? Can a god spare when his nostrils are opened for the smell of blood? If so, of what use is it to be a god? How is he happier than a man if he must spare? Moreover, would ye bring the curse of Odin upon you all? I say to you, steal his sacrifice, and you yourselves shall be sacrificed, you, your wives, your children, ay, and even your cattle and the fruit of your fields." When they heard this, the people groaned and shouted, "Let Steinar die! Kill him! Kill him that Odin may be fed!" "Aye," answered Leif, "Steinar shall die. See, he dies." Then, with a leap like to that of a hungry wolf, he sprang upon the bound man and slew him. I see it now, the rude temple, the glaring statue of the god, the gathered crowd, open-mouthed and eyed, the spring sunshine shining quietly over all, and running past the place, a ewe calling to the lamb that it had lost. I see the dying Steinar turn his white face and smile a farewell to me with his fading eyes. I see Leif getting to his horrible rites that he might learn the omen, and lastly I see the red sword of the Wanderer appear suddenly between me and him, and in my hand. I think that my purpose was to cut him down. Only a thought arose within me. This priest was not to blame. He did no more than he had been taught. Who taught him? The God he served, through whom he gained honour and livelihood. So the God was to blame, the God that drank the blood of men, as a thrall drinks ale to satisfy his filthy appetite. Could such a monster be a god? Nay, he must be a devil, and why should free men serve devils? At least I would not. I would cast him off and let him avenge himself upon me if he could. I, Olaf, would match myself against this god, or devil. I strode past Leif and the altar to where the statue of Odin sat within the temple. "Hearken!" I said in such a voice that all lifted their eyes from the scene of butchery to me. "You believe in Odin, do you not?" They answered, "Aye." "Then you believe that he can revenge himself upon one who rejects and affronts him?" "Aye," they answered again. "If this be so," I went on, "will you swear to leave the matter between Odin and me, Olaf, to be settled according to the law of single combat, and give peace to the victor, with promise from all harm save at the hands of his foe?" "Aye," they answered, yet scarcely understanding what they said. "Good!" I cried. "Now, God Odin, I, Olaf, a man, challenge you to single combat. Strike you first. You, Odin, whom I name devil and wolf of the sky, but no god. Strike you first, bloody murderer, and kill me if you can who await your stroke." Then I folded my arms and stared at the statue's stony eyes, which stared back at me, while all the people gasped. For a full minute I waited thus, but all that happened was that a wren settled on the head of Odin and twittered there, then flew off to its nest in the thatch. "Now," I cried, "you have had your turn, and mine comes." I drew the Wanderer's sword and sprang at Odin. My first stroke sunk up to the hilt in his hollow belly. My next cut the sceptre from his hand. My third, a great one, hewed the head from off him. It came rattling down, and out of it crawled a viper which reared itself up and hissed. I set my heel upon the reptile's head and crushed it, and slowly it writhed itself to death. "Now, good folk," I cried, "what say you of your god Odin?" They answered nothing, for all of them were in flight. Yes, even Leif fled, cursing me over his shoulder as he went. Presently I was alone with the dead Steinar and the shattered god, and in that loneliness strange visions came to me. For I felt I had done a mighty deed, one that made me happy. Round the wall of the temple crept a figure. It was that of Freydisa, whose face was white and scared. "You are a great man, Olaf," she said, "but how will it end?" "I do not know," I answered. "I have done what my heart told me, neither more nor less, and I bide the issue. Odin shall have his chance, for here I stay till dark, and then, if I live, I leave this land. Go, get me all the gold that is mine from the hall, and bring it here to me by moonrise, and with it some garments and my armour. Bring me also my best horse." "You leave this land?" she said. "That means you leave me, who love you, to go forth as the Wanderer went, following a dream to the south. Well, it is best that you should go, for whatever they have promised you but now, it is sure that the priests will kill you, even if you escape the vengeance of the god." And she looked askance at the shattered statue which had sat in its place for so many generations that none knew who had set it there or when. "I have killed the god," I answered, pointing to the crushed viper. "Not quite, Olaf, for see, its tail still moves." Then she went, leaving me alone. I sat myself down by the murdered Steinar and stared at him. Could he be really dead, I wondered, or did he live on elsewhere? My faith had taught me of a place called Valhalla where brave men went, but in that faith and its gods I believed no more. This Valhalla was but a child's tale, invented by a bloody-minded folk who loved slaughter. Wherever Steinar and the others were, it was not in Valhalla. Then perhaps they slept like the beasts do after these have been butchered. Perhaps death was the end of all. It might be so, and yet I did not believe it. There were other gods besides Odin and his company, for what were those which we had found in the Wanderer's tomb? I longed to know. Yes, I would go south as the Wanderer went and search for them. Perhaps there in the south I should learn the secret truth and other things. I grew weary of these thoughts of gods who could not be found, or who, if found, were but devils. My mind went back to my childhood's days, when Steinar and I played together on the meads, before any woman had come to wreck our lives. I remember how we used to play until we were weary, and how at nights I would tell him tales that I had learned or woven, until at length we sank to sleep, our arms about each other's necks. My heart grew full of sorrow, that in the end broke from my eyes in tears. Yes, I wept over Steinar, my brother Steinar, and kissed his cold and gory lips. The evening gathered, the twilight grew, and one by one the stars sprang out in the quiet sky, till the moon appeared and gathered all their radiance to herself. I heard the sound of a woman's dress and looked up, thinking to see Freydisa. But this woman was not Freydisa. It was Iduna. Yes, Iduna's self. I rose to my feet and stood still. She also stood still, on the farther side of the stone of sacrifice, whereon that which had been Steinar was stretched between us. Then came a struggle of silence in which she won at last. "Have you come to save him?" I asked. "If so, it is too late. Woman, behold your work." She shook her beautiful head and answered, almost in a whisper, "Nay, Olaf, I am come to beg a boon of you, that you will slay me, here and now." "Am I a butcher or a priest?" I muttered. "Oh, slay me, Olaf," she went on, throwing herself upon her knees before me and rending open her blue robe that her young breast might take the sword. "Thus, perchance, I, who love life, may pay some of the price of sin, who, if I slew myself, would but multiply the debt, which in truth I dare not do." Still I shook my head, and once more she spoke. "Olaf, in this way or in that, doubtless my end will find me, for if you refuse this office, there are others of sterner stuff. The knife that smote Steinar is not blunted. Yet before I die, who am come here but to die, I pray you hear the truth, that my memory may be somewhat less vile to you in the after years. Olaf, you think me the falsest of the false, yet I am not altogether so. Hark you now. At the time that Steinar sought me, some madness took him. So soon as we were alone together, his first words were, 'I am bewitched. I love you.' Olaf, I'll not deny that his worship stirred my blood, for he was goodly, well, and different to you, with your dreaming eyes and thoughts that are too deep for me. And yet, by my breath, I swear that I meant no harm. When we rowed together to the ship, it was my purpose to return upon the morrow and be made your wife. But there upon the ship my father compelled me. It was his fancy that I should break with you and be wed to Steinar, who had become so great a lord, and who pleased him better than you did, Olaf. And as for Steinar, why, have I not told you that he was mad for me?" "Steinar's tale was otherwise, Iduna. He said that you went first and that he followed." "Were those his words, Olaf? For if so, how can I give the dead the lie? The one who died through me. It seems unholy. Yet in this matter Steinar had no reason left to him. And whether you believe me or no, I tell the truth. Oh, hear me out, for who knows when they will come to take me, who have walked into this nest of foes that I may be taken. Pray as I would, the ship was run out and we sailed for Lesso. There, in my father's hall, upon my knees, I entreated him to hold his hand. I told him what was true, that of you twain it was you I loved, not Steinar. I told him that if he forced this marriage, war would come of it that might mean all our deaths. But these things moved him nothing. Then I told him that such a deed of shame would mean the loss of Steinar's lordship, so that by it he would gain no profit. At last he listened, for this touched him near. You know the rest. Thorvald, your father, and Ragnar, who ever hated me, pressed on the war despite all our offerings of peace. So the ships met, and Hela had her fill." "Aye, Iduna, whatever else is false, this is true, that Hela had her fill. Olaf, I have but one more thing to say. It is this. Only once did those dead lips touch mine, and then it was against my will. Aye, although it is shameful, you must learn the truth. My father held me, Olaf, while I took the betrothal kiss, because I must. But, as you know, there was no marriage." "Aye, I know that," I said, "because Steinar told me so. And save for that one kiss, Olaf, I am still the maid who once loved you so well." Now I stared at her. Could this woman lie so blackly over dead Steinar's corpse? When all was said and done, was it not possible that she spoke the truth, and that we had been but playthings in the hands of an evil fate, save for some trifling error which might be forgiven to one who, as she said, loved the worship that was her beauty's due? What if she were innocent, after all? Perhaps my face showed the thoughts that were passing through my mind. At the least, she who knew me well found skill to read them. She crept towards me, still on her knees. She cast her arms about me, and resting her weight upon me, drew herself to her feet. "Olaf," she whispered, I love you. I love you well, as I have always done, though I may have erred a little, as women wayward and still unwed are apt to do. Olaf, they told me yonder how you had matched yourself against the god, with his priests for judges, and smitten him, and I thought this the greatest deed that I have ever known. I used to think you something of a weakling, Olaf, not in your body, but in your mind, one lost in music and runes, who feared to put things to the touch of war. But you have shown me otherwise. You slew the bear. You overcame Steinar, who was so much stronger than you are, in the battle of the ships. And now you have bearded Odin, the All-Father. Look, his head lies there hewn off by you for the sake of one who, after all, had done you wrong, Olaf. Such a deed as that touches a woman's heart, and he who does it is the man she would wish to lie upon her breast and be her lord. Olaf, all this past evil may yet be forgotten. We might go and live elsewhere for a while, or always, for with your wisdom and my beauty joined together, what could we not conquer? Olaf, I love you now as I have never loved before. Can you not love me again? Her arms clung about me, her beautiful blue eyes, shimmering with moonlit tears, held my eyes, and my heart melted beneath her breath as winter snows melt in the winds of spring. She saw, she understood. She cast herself upon me, shaking her long hair over both of us and seeking my lips. Almost she had found them, when feeling something hard between me and her, something that hurt me, I looked down. Her cloak had slipped or been thrown aside, and my eye caught the glint of gold and jewels. In an instant I remembered the Wanderer's necklace and the dream, and with those memories my heart froze again. "Nay, Iduna," I said. "I loved you well. There's no man will ever love you more, and you are very fair. Whether you speak true words or false, I do not know. It is between you and your own spirit. But this I do know, that betwixt us runs the river of Steinar's blood, ay, and the blood of Thorvald, my father, of Thora, my mother, of Ragnar, my brother, and of many another man who clung to us. And that is a stream which I cannot cross. Find you another husband, Iduna the Fair, since never will I call you wife." She loosed her arms from round me and, lifting them again, unclasped the Wanderer's necklace from about her breast. "This is it," she said, "which has brought all these evils on me. Take it back again, and when you find her, give it to that one for whom it is meant, that one whom you love truly, as, wherever you may have thought, you never have loved me." Then she sank upon the ground, and resting her golden head upon dead Steinar's breast, she wept. I think it was then that Freydisa returned. At least, I recall her tall form standing near the stone of sacrifice, gazing at us both, a strange smile on her face. "Have you withstood?" she said. "Then truly you are in the way of victory and have less to fear from woman than I thought. All things are ready as you commanded, my lord Olaf, and there remains but to say farewell, which you had best do quickly, for they plot your death yonder." "Freydisa," I answered, "I go, but perchance I shall return again. Meanwhile, all I have is yours, with this charge. Guard you yonder woman and see her safe to her home, or wherever she would go, and to Steinar here give honourable burial." Then the darkness of oblivion falls, and I remember no more save the white face of Iduna, her brow stained with Steinar's life blood, watching me as I went. End of chapter 6. Book 2, Chapter 1 of The Wanderer's Necklace by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Book 2, Byzantium, Chapter 1, Irene, Empress of the earth. A gulf of blackness, and the curtain lifts again upon a very different Olaf from the young northern lord who parted from Iduna at the place of sacrifice at Ar. I see myself standing upon a terrace that overlooks a stretch of quiet water, which I now know was the Bosphorus. Behind me are a great palace and the lights of a vast city. In front, upon the sea and upon the further shore, are other lights. The moon shines bright above me, and having naught else to do, I study my reflection in my own burnished shield. It shows a man of early middle life. He may be 30 or 35 years of age, the same Olaf, yet much changed. For now my frame is tall and well knit, though still somewhat slender. My face is bronzed by southern suns. I wear a short beard. There is a scar across my cheek, got in some battle. My eyes are quiet, and have lost the first liveliness of youth. I know that I am the captain of the Northern Guard of the Empress Irene, widow of the dead Emperor Leo IV, and joint ruler of the Eastern Empire with her young son, Constantine, the sixth of that name. How I came to fill this place, however, I do not know. The story of my journey from Jutland to Byzantium is lost to me. Doubtless it must have taken years, and after these more years of humble service before I rose to be the captain of Irene's Northern Guard that she kept ever about her person, because she would not trust her Grecian soldiers. My armour was very rich, yet I noticed about myself two things that were with me in my youth. One was the necklace of golden shells, divided from each other by beetles of emeralds, that I had taken from the Wanderer's grave at Ar, and the other the cross-hilted bronze sword with which the same Wanderer had been girded in his grave. I know now that because of this weapon, which was of a metal and shape strange to that land, I had the by-name of Olaf Redsword, and I know also that none wished to feel the weight of this same ancient blade. When I had finished looking at myself in the shield, I leaned upon the parapet, staring at the sea, and wondering how the plains of Ar looked that night beneath this self-same moon, and whether Freydisa were dead by now, and whom Iduna had married, and if she ever thought of me, or if Steinar came to haunt her sleep. So I mused, till presently I felt a light touch upon my shoulder, and swung round to find myself face to face with the Empress Irene herself. "Augusta," I said, saluting, for as Empress that was her Roman title, even though she was a Greek. "You guard me well, friend Olaf," she said with a little laugh. "Why, any enemy, and Christ knows I have plenty, could have cut you down before ever you knew that he was there." "Not so, Augusta," I answered, for I could speak their Greek tongue well, since at the end of the terrace the guard stand night and day, men of my own blood who can be trusted. Nothing which does not fly could gain this place save through your own chambers, that are also guarded. It is not unusual for any watch to be set here. Still, I came myself in case the Empress might need me." "That is kind of you, my Captain Olaf, and I think I do need you. At least, I cannot sleep in this heat, and I'm weary of the thoughts of state, for many matters trouble me just now. Come, change my mind, if you can, for if so, I'll thank you. Tell me of yourself when you were young. Why did you leave your northern home, where I've heard you were a barbarian chief, and wander hither to Byzantium?" "Because of a woman," I answered. "Ah," she said, clapping her hands, "I knew it. Tell me of this woman whom you love." "The story is short, Augusta. She bewitched my foster brother and caused him to be sacrificed to the northern gods as a troth breaker, and I do not love her." "You'd not admit it if you did, Olaf. Was she beautiful? Well, say, as I am?" I turned and looked at the Empress, studying her from head to foot. She was shorter than Iduna by some inches, also older, and therefore of a thicker build, but being a fair Greek, her colour was much the same, save that the eyes were darker. The mouth, too, was more hard. For the rest, she was a royal-looking and lovely woman in the flower of her age, and splendidly attired in robes broidered with gold, over which she wore long strings of rounded pearls. Her rippling golden hair was dressed in the old Greek fashion, tied in a simple knot behind her head, and over it was thrown a light veil worked with gold stars. "Well, Captain Olaf," she said, "have you finished weighing my poor looks against those of this northern girl in the scales of your judgment? If so, which of us tips the beam?" "Iduna was more beautiful than ever you can have been, Augusta," I replied quietly. She stared at me till her eyes grew quite round, then puckered up her mouth as though to say something furious, and finally burst out laughing. "By every saint in Byzantium," she said, "or rather by their relics, for of live ones there are none, you are the strangest man whom I have known. Are you weary of life that you dare to say such a thing to me, the Empress Irene?" "Am I weary of life? Well, Augusta, on the whole I think I am. It seems to me that death and after it may interest us more. For the rest, you asked me a question, and, after the fashion of my people, I answered it as truthfully as I could." "By my head, you have said it again," she exclaimed. "Have you not heard, most innocent Northman, that there are truths which should not be mentioned, and much less repeated?" "I have heard many things in Byzantium, Augusta, but I pay no attention to any of them, or, indeed, to little except my duty. Now that this what's the girl's name?" "Iduna the Fair," I said. "This Iduna has thrown you over, at which I am sure I do not wonder. What mistresses have you in Byzantium, Olaf the Dane?" "None at all," I answered. "Women are pleasant, but one may buy sweets too dear, and all that ever I saw put together were not worth my brother Steinar, who lost his life through one of them. Tell me, Captain Olaf, are you a secret member of this new society of hermits of which they talk so much, who, if they see a woman, must hold their faces in the sand for 5 minutes afterwards?" "I've never heard of them, Augusta." "Are you a Christian?" "No, I'm considering that religion, or rather its followers." "Are you a pagan, then?" "No. I fought a duel with the god Odin, and cut his head off with this sword, and that is why I left the North, where they worship Odin." "Then what are you?" she said, stamping her foot in exasperation. "I am the captain of your Imperial Majesty's private guard, a little of a philosopher, and a fair poet in my own language, not in Greek. Also, I can play the harp." "You say 'not in Greek' for fear lest I should ask you to write verses to me, which indeed I shall never do. Olaf, a soldier, a poet, a philosopher, a harpist, one who has renounced women. Now, why have you renounced women, which is unnatural in a man who is not a monk? It must be because you still love this Iduna and hope to get her some day." I shook my head and answered, "I might have done that long ago, Augusta." "Then it must be because there is some other woman whom you wish to gain. Why do you always wear that strange necklace?" she added sharply. "Did it belong to this savage girl Iduna, as from the look of it it might well have done?" "Not so, Augusta. She took it for a while, and it brought sorrow on her, as it will do on all women save one who may or may not live to day." "Give it to me. I have taken a fancy to it. It is unusual. Oh, fear not, you shall receive its value." "If you wish the necklace, Augusta, you must take the head as well, and my counsel to you is that you do neither, since they will bring you no good luck." In truth, Captain Olaf, you anger me with your riddles. What do you mean about this necklace? I mean, Augusta, that I took it from a very ancient grave. That I can believe, for the jeweller who made it worked in old Egypt, she interrupted. And thereafter I dreamed a dream, I went on, of the woman who wears the other half of it. I have not seen her yet, but when I do I shall know her at once. So, she exclaimed, did I not tell you that, east or west or north or south, there is some other woman? There was once, Augusta, quite 1,000 years ago or more, and there may be again now, or 1,000 years hence. That is what I am trying to find out. You say the work is Egyptian. Augusta, at your convenience, will you be pleased to make another captain in my place? I would visit Egypt. If you leave Byzantium without express permission under my own hand, not the Emperor's or anybody else's hand, mine, I say, and are caught, your eyes shall be put out as a deserter, she said savagely. As the Augusta pleases, I answered, saluting. Olaf, she went on in a more gentle voice, you are clearly mad. But to tell the truth, you are also a madman who pleases me, since I weary of the rogues and lick-spittles who call themselves sane in Byzantium. Why, there's not a man in all the city who would dare to speak to me as you have spoken tonight. And like that breeze from the sea, it is refreshing. Lend me that necklace, Olaf, till tomorrow morning. I want to examine it in the lamplight, and I swear to you that I will not take it from you or play you any tricks about it. Will you promise not to wear it, Augusta? Of course. Is it likely that I should wish to wear it on my bare breast after it has been rubbing against your soiled armour? Without another word, I unlocked the necklace and handed it to her. She ran to a little distance and, with one of those swift movements that were common to her, fastened it about her own neck. Then she returned and threw the great string of pearls, which she had removed to make place for it, over my head. Now, have you found the woman of that dream, Olaf? She asked, turning herself about in the moonlight. I shook my head and answered, Nay, Augusta, but I fear that you have found misfortune. When it comes, I pray you to remember that you promised not to wear the necklace. Also that your soldier Olaf, Thorvald's son, would have given his life rather than that you should have done so. Not for the sake of any dream, but for your sake, Augusta, whom it is his business to protect. Would, then, it were your business either to protect me a little more or a little less, she exclaimed bitterly. Having uttered this dark saying, she vanished from the terrace, still wearing the string of golden shells. On the following morning the necklace was returned to me by Irene's favourite lady, who smiled as she gave it to me. She was a dark-eyed, witty, and able girl named Martina, who had been my friend for a long while. The Augusta said that you were to examine this jewel to see that it has not been changed. I never suggested that the Augusta was a thief, I replied. Therefore it is unnecessary. She said also that I was to tell you, in case you should think that it has been befouled by her wearing of it, that she has had it carefully cleaned. This is thoughtful of her, Martina, for it needed washing. Now, will you take the Augusta's pearls, which she left with me in error? I have no orders to take any pearls, Captain Olaf, although I did notice that 2 of the finest strings in the Empire are missing. Oh, you great northern child, she added in a whisper, keep the pearls. They are a gift, and worth a prince's ransom. And take whatever else you can get, and keep that too. Note: I have no further vision concerning these priceless pearls, and do not know what became of them. Perhaps I was robbed of them during my imprisonment, or perhaps I gave them to Heliodore or to Martina. Where are they now, I wonder? Editor. End of note. Then before I could answer her, she was gone. For some weeks after this I saw no more of the Augusta, who appeared to avoid me. One day, however, I was summoned to her presence in her private apartments by the waiting Lady Martina, and went, to find her alone save for Martina. The first thing that I noticed was that she wore about her neck an exact copy of the necklace of golden shells and emerald beetles. Further, that about her waist was a girdle, and on her wrist a bracelet of similar design. Pretending to see nothing, I saluted and stood to attention. "Captain," she began, "yonder," and she waved her hand towards the city, so that I could not fail to see the shell bracelet, "the uncles of my son, the Emperor, lie in prison. Have you heard of the matter? And if so, what have you heard?" "I have heard, Augusta, that the Emperor, having been defeated by the Bulgarians, some of the legions proposed to set his uncle Nicephorus, he who has been made a priest, upon the throne. I have heard further that thereon the Emperor caused the Cæsar Nicephorus to be blinded, and the tongues of the other two Cæsars and of their two brothers, the Nobilissimi, to be slit. Do you think well of such a deed, Olaf?" "Augusta," I answered, "in this city I make it my business not to think, for if I did I should certainly go mad. Still, on this matter I command you to think, and to speak the truth of your thoughts. No harm shall come to you, whatever they may be." "Augusta, I obey you. I think that whoever did this wicked thing must be a devil, either returned from that hell of which everyone is so fond of talking here, or on the road thither." "Oh, you think that, do you? So I was right then when I told Martina that there was only one honest opinion to be had in Constantinople, and I knew where to get it. Well, most severe and indignant judge, suppose I tell you it was I who commanded that the deed should be done. Then would you change your judgment?" "Not so, Augusta. I should only think much worse of you than ever I did before. If these great persons were traitors to the State, they should have been executed. But to torment them, to take away the sight of heaven, and to bring them to the level of dumb beasts, all that their actual blood may not be on the tormentor's hand, why, the act is vile. So, at least, it would be held in those northern lands which you are pleased to call barbarian." Now Irene sprang from her seat and clapped her hands for joy. "You hear what he says, Martina? And the Emperor shall hear it too, aye, and so shall my ministers, Stauracius and Aetius, who supported him in this matter. I alone withstood him. I prayed him for his soul's sake to be merciful. He answered that he would no longer be governed by a woman. He knew how to safeguard his empire, and what conscience should allow and what refuse. So, in spite of all my tears and prayers, the vile deed was done, as I think for no good cause. Well, it cannot be undone. Yet, Olaf, I fear that it may be added to, and that these royal-born men may be foully murdered. Therefore, I put you in charge of the prison where they lie. Here is the signed order. Take with you what men you may think needful, and hold that place, even should the Emperor himself command you to open. See also that the prisoners within are cared for and have all they need, but do not suffer them to escape." I saluted and turned to go, when Irene called me back. At that moment, too, in obedience to some sign which she made, Martina left the chamber, looking at me oddly as she did so. I came and stood before the Empress, who, I noticed, seemed somewhat troubled, for her breast heaved and her gaze was fixed upon the floor now. It was of mosaic, and represented a heathen goddess talking to a young man who stood before her with his arms folded. The goddess was angry with the man, and held in her left hand a dagger, as though she would stab him, although her right arm was stretched out to embrace him, and her attitude was one of pleading. Irene lifted her head, and I saw that her fine eyes were filled with tears. "Olaf," she said, "I am in much trouble, and I know not where to find a friend." I smiled and answered, "Need an empress seek far for friends?" Aye, Olaf, farther than anyone who breathes. An empress can find flatterers and partisans, but not a single friend. Such love her only for what she can give them. But if fortune went against her, I say that they would fall away like leaves from a tree in a winter frost, so that she stood naked to every bitter blast of heaven. Yes, and then would come the foe and root up that tree and burn it to give them warmth and to celebrate their triumph. So I think, Olaf, it will be with me before all is done. Even my son hates me, Olaf, my only child for whose true welfare I strive night and day. I have heard as much, Augusta, I said. You have heard, like all the world, but what else of ill have you heard of me, Olaf? Speak out, man, I'm here to learn the truth. I have heard that you are very ambitious, Augusta, and that you hate your son as much as he hates you, because he is a rival to your power. It is rumoured that you would be glad if he were dead and you left to reign alone. Then a lie is rumoured, Olaf. Yet it is true that I am ambitious, who see far and would build this tottering empire afresh. Olaf, it is a bitter thing to have begotten a fool. Then why do you not marry again and beget others who might be no fools, Augusta? I asked bluntly. Ah, why? She answered, flashing a curious glance upon me. In truth, I do not quite know why, but from no lack of suitors, since were she but a hideous hag, an empress would find these. Olaf, you may have learned that I was not born in the purple. I was but a Greek girl of good race, not even noble, to whom God gave a gift of beauty. And when I was young, I saw a man who took my fancy, also of old race, yet but a merchant of fruits which they grow in Greece and sell here and at Rome. I wished to marry him, but my mother, a far-seeing woman, said that such beauty as mine, though less than that of yours of Duna the Fair, Olaf, was worth money or rank. So they sent away my merchant of fruits, who married the daughter of another merchant of fruits and throve very well in business. He came to see me some years ago, fat as a tub, his face scored all over with the marks of the spotted sickness, and we talked about old times. I gave him a concession to import dried fruits into Byzantium. That is what he came to see me for. And now he's dead. Well, my mother was right, for afterwards this poor beauty of mine took the fancy of the late Emperor, and being very pious, he married me. So the Greek girl, by the will of God, became Augusta, and the first woman in the world. By the will of God? I repeated. Aye, I suppose so, or else all is raw chance. At least I, who today might have been bargaining over dried fruits, as I should have done had I won my will, am what you know. Look at this robe, and she spread her glittering dress before me. Hark to the tramp of those guards before my door. Why, you are their captain. Go into the antechambers and see the ambassadors waiting there in the hope of a word with the ruler of the earth. Look at my legions mustered on the drilling grounds, and understand how great the Grecian girl has grown by virtue of the face is less beauteous than that of Iduna the Fair. I understand all this, Augusta, I answered. Yet it would seem that you are not happy. Did you not tell me just now that you could not find a friend, and that you had begotten a fool? Happy, Olaf? Why, I am wretched, so wretched that I often think the hell of which the priests preach is here on earth, and that I dwell in its hottest fires. Unless love hides it, what happiness is there in this life of ours, which must end in blackest death? Love has its miseries also, Augusta. That I know, for once I loved. Aye, but then the love was not true. For this is the greatest curse of all, to love and not be loved. For the sake of a perfect love, if it could be won, why, I'd sacrifice even my ambition. Then you must keep your ambition, Augusta, since in this world you'll find nothing perfect. Olaf, I am not so sure. Thoughts have come to me. Olaf, I told you that I have no friend in all this glittering court. Will you be my friend? I am your honest servant, Augusta, and I think that such a one is the best of friends. That's so, and yet no man can be a true friend to a woman unless he is more than a friend. Nature has writ it so. I do not understand, I answered. You mean that you will not understand, and perhaps you are wise. Why do you stare at the pavement? There's a story written on it. The old goddess of my people, Aphrodite, loved a certain Adonis. So runs the fable. But he loved not her, and thought only of his sports. Look, she woos him there, he rejects her, and in her rage she stabs him. Not so, I answered. Of the end of the story I know nothing, but if she had meant to kill him, the dagger would be in her right hand, not in her left. That's true, Olaf, and in the end it was fate which killed him, not the goddess whom he had scorned. And yet, Olaf, it is not wise to scorn goddesses. Oh, of what do I talk? You'll befriend me, will you not? I, Augusta, to the last drop of my blood, as is my duty. Do I not take your pay? Then thus I seal our friendship, and here's an earnest of the pay, Irene said slowly, and bending forward, she kissed me on the lips. At this moment the doors of the chamber were thrown open. Through them, preceded by heralds that at once drew back again, entered the great minister Stauracius, a fat, oily-faced man with a cunning eye, who announced in a high, thin voice, "The ambassadors of the Persians wait upon you, Augusta, as you appointed at this hour." End of chapter 1.